Hello, my name is Colby Sharp. I am a fifth grade teacher in Michigan, and I am so thankful that you are listening or watching to this conversation that I am about to have, which I'm super excited about. I am talking with Rajani LaRocca, who is the author of the beautiful 2021 novel in verse. After finishing the book, I just could not. I just wanted to talk to her. I just wanted to talk to her. I wanted to talk to someone. I wanted to talk to all of the people that I knew that hadn't read the book, but I also didn't want to ruin the book for them. So you need to read the book. If you were going to try not to spoil anything, but you need to read the book. If you have not read Red, White, and Whole, your year will not be complete until you do. So promise me that you will read this novel in verse. You won't regret it. If you regret it, you can call me and I will refund your money. Like, the book is that good. I believe in this book that much. So without further ado, I am going to bring in Rajani. Hello, good evening. How are you?
I'm good, Colby. Great to see you.
It's wonderful to have you here tonight. How have things been going? You and I talked a little bit before we started recording. It has been 1 year since I guess most of the United States has been turned upside down. How has that year been for you?
I mean, much like it's been for a lot of people, it's been very strange. It's been I'm a doctor, so I'm a internal medicine physician. I'm a primary care doctor. So initially, right before everything shut down, we were still kind of seeing patients in an outpatient setting, and after a while, it was like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And then everything changed, and then for a while we were only seeing patients virtually. And then a few months into the pandemic, we kind of developed protocols and started seeing some people in person, but still a lot of people remotely. So it's been wild. I had a child graduate from high school and start college. I had another one in college who came home and then went back, and it's been strange. And so for our family, we got to spend a lot of time with our children, which we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, which was good. My parents also live with us, so there was the constant state of just don't bring it home to the older people at home. So, we managed to be okay, and now some of us are vaccinated, and others are hoping to get vaccinated soon. So, things are looking up.
Wow. So you had a kid graduate high school, go to college. So that's like a big moment in life, right? So they missed the end of their senior year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, she missed the end of her senior year. I have an older child, a son who was in college and just came back. And, so it was very strange because, she missed the end, all the normal stuff that you do at the end of senior year. That was all done. But she did get to have like a virtual graduation, which was actually really special. And that was kind of lovely. And we got to be with her instead of watching her. We were with her, which was kind of cool. And, during the nice weather, she had like socially distanced, gatherings with like people in the yard, like 6 feet apart and, waving at each other with masks on. And, at least she got to see some of her friends. But I think it's really been hard on young people to just be away from other young people. We were lucky enough that both their colleges did have in-person classes. They went to school, both of them. They were tested frequently, and they managed to, in the first semester, were basically all virtual classes. So they were in their rooms doing their classes, but at least they were on campus and got to see some of their friends. And now they have more hybrid stuff, but they're both at school now too. Yeah.
And this is the only way that your daughter knows college.
Yes.
She's a freshman. Wow.
Yes.
Well, yes. I hope that the next few years for her go a lot more smoothly and traditionally. So you have the opportunity to release a book during a pandemic, and how that has been different. It's been fascinating to see creators do lots of different things to get their books into the hands of readers. Can you just tell us a little bit about, for anyone watching or listening that doesn't know anything about your book, give us the elevator pitch for Red, White, and Whole.
So I will show you the beautiful cover. Red, White, and Whole is a novel in verse, so written in poetry, in free verse. And it is set in 1983. And it is about Reha, who is the 13-year-old daughter of Indian immigrants, who feels torn between the worlds of her parents and their immigrant community and her friends at school and like 80s pop culture. And just like other teenagers, she loves Cyndi Lauper. She loves to watch MTV. She wants to wear 80s fashions. But her parents, and especially her mom, have different ideas about what is suitable for a girl her age to do. And, one of the things she wants to do is she finally, as an eighth grader, kind of wants to go to the middle school dance for the first time because she kind of likes someone for the first time. And her mom is really not interested in it. But then her mom is diagnosed with leukemia, which is a kind of blood cancer. And Reha feels torn in a completely different way. And she wonders, she kind of blames herself for being worried about all these things like fitting in and being like other kids, and thinks that if she could just be the perfect daughter, the daughter that her parents want her to be, that she can somehow help her mom get better.
It is such a beautiful book. I love hearing you talk about it. One of the things I was so fascinated about throughout the book is this common idea that's in her head of being stuck between two different worlds, and it comes up over and over and over again. Is that something that was a part of the book from the very beginning? And talk a little bit about just how you were able to weave that throughout the story.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. This book came to me as a metaphor, and the metaphor was blood. And I thought about blood and all that it means in terms of like biology, of course. That's what part of what the title refers to. Red, white, and whole refers to red cells, white cells, and whole blood. So that's part of it. But also what it means in terms of family and kind of what your parents give to you, what your ancestors give to you, and also what it means in terms of community. So I knew this was a story about a girl who felt caught between places. And so I think it was from part of the story from the very beginning. And in many ways, it mirrors a lot of what I experienced when I was a kid. I was 13 in 1983. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, where we had a small Indian community, but not a huge one. So we kind of like all hung out together, which was great. And I have to say that I felt like a completely normal American teenager. And then I would go home on the weekends and I would spend all weekend with my parents and with our Indian friends. And part of me was like, well, which one is the real me? Like, is it the person that goes to school all week, or is it the person that's here on the weekends? And I felt that kind of sense. And, we had extended family in India. We would go every few years and see them during the summer. And I felt like, wow, in the US, I'm not quite sure that I fit in here. And then I would go to India and I'd be like, wow, like everyone may look like me, but I don't feel like I fit in here either.
How do you feel now?
Oh, as an adult, I think as you get older, you realize that you decide where you belong. And so, I was lucky enough to find the person that I was going to marry very young in life. And so we were together and we were a family, like very like quickly. And he's not Indian, he's Italian American, and his family has been nothing but wonderful to me, and my family's been wonderful to him. And it worked. And so, part of what I think I wrote this book was that I wanted to tell my past self that it can work out, that you decide where you belong and who you belong to, and you find the people who get you and understand you and love you.
What do you think your past self would think of how things have turned out?
Well, I think she'd be really excited and happy. I think she would be horrified that I wrote a book about it. I think she'd be like, why did you take like the most embarrassing moments of my life and put it in a book? And to be clear, this is not a memoir. This is definitely fiction. But there are emotions in this book and like thoughts that like came right from the thoughts I had when I was 13.
I'm fascinated that that with the setting of like you growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, and talking about that. I just knowing the impact that it had on. For instance, I just read a book about Kwame Alexander and James Patterson's Becoming Muhammad Ali, and the fact just what it was like for him growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm sure that a lot of cities um, share similar things and have their own uniqueness to them. Do you think that things are similar to what they were like when you grew up in Louisville in the 80s? Do you, and I know they've been in the news as well for not so great things this past year with Breonna Taylor. So how would you describe Louisville and what you remember of it and what you know about it now?
I I loved growing up in Louisville. It was a wonderful place to grow up. It had a lot of culture. It had, it has an opera, it has a ballet, it has like a fine arts center. Like it was a pretty remarkable place. And I say this, Reha feels this in the book because the community that she grows up in really is very much like the place that I grew up in. So, as an immigrant, it's interesting, that your experience can be very different depending on where you live. And the community was large enough that there were people around like who shared kind of what it was like to be an immigrant at the time. When we first moved there, like, there was no Indian grocery store. Like it was just a completely different world, and then as we lived there, more and more people came and there were all these kind of interesting things that popped up, including Indian groceries. But because it was a small community, we kind of hung out with everybody. And so that was really wonderful because when communities get large enough, at least Indian communities, there's so many languages, so many religions, so many regions of the country that are varied. And most of the time people hang out with people who speak their language exclusively. And for example, I had cousins who grew up in Houston, Texas, which has an enormous Indian community. And when I went to visit them at one point, they were like, "Oh yeah, I was like, all your friends, like they all come from the same part of India." And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, I can't even comprehend that. That's like so wild to me. But anyway, so I got to meet a wide variety of people from a wide variety of places. And that was wonderful. And Louisville itself is a very progressive, welcoming city. They used to have these things in the summer called heritage weekends where they would have like, different communities on each weekend of the summer. And then people would come and we would make food and there would be dance performances and there would be music and all kinds of stuff. We used to have a ball. Like we, basically like all year long we'd plan for the next summer and then get ready to perform and do all our things. It was a great place. And I loved it there. But, it was a smaller place compared to some other places that I've lived in. And by the end of high school, I was like, I feel like I know everybody, which was not true, but it felt like that. And I was like, I kind of need to get out of here and get someplace bigger. So I came to school in the Boston area and then we never left. And that's where I am now. But I love Louisville.
I'm so fascinated by how people's journeys to what the journey of an author is like how in the world did this girl from Louisville who went to medical school and is a practicing doctor also writes middle grade fiction? I just don't understand how that works. So can you talk about like when you first loved writing or maybe you hated writing and how in the world this all came together?
Okay, so I should warn you, if you haven't figured this out yet, I am a strange person. Okay.
Those are the best kind.
Exactly. I've always been a little weird. Okay. I've always liked lots of things, like lots of things. There are actually very few things that I don't like learning about. Like I can't think about things that can't think of a thing that I wouldn't want to learn about. And so I loved books. I loved books, like was obsessed with them from a very, very, very young age. Like I was just like, I was that kid and I'm an only child. So I was always like at the table with a book. And bless my parents, they just let me read whatever it was I wanted to read. They were not going to complain about that. So I read a lot and I wrote a decent amount, like probably like creatively, but not very well. And I will tell you, but I also knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a doctor. And it was because of a book. There was a book called, let's see if I have it here. Oh, I don't see it right now. Oh, here it is. Hold on. It's out of print, but I managed to find it. It's called Ouch. All about hurts and all about cuts and other hurts. Okay.
All right.
And this is like from like 1977. Okay. And I have to tell you, I can still remember the diagram of, oh, where is it? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, guys. So I read this. This is like when you get cut and like the little blood vessel, this little capillary breaks, and then the blood comes out and the white blood cells come and like heal things. And then there's the platelet plug and the fibrin and the scab that forms. Okay. I still remember that. I remember reading this book and being like, that's too cool that like all this stuff happens and you don't have to think about it and it just happens and like you get better, right? And so I knew kind of early on, I was like, I want to do this. But I also loved reading and I loved writing. And I tell this to kids during school visits because it was a teacher who opened the door for me because I thought I'm going to go into medicine. I'm not going to write. I was in a creative writing class in high school. And my teacher, Mr. Hertzfeld, said to me, who says you have to choose? And then he brought in all these books by doctors who were also authors.
What? That's so brilliant.
Like, right? It was amazing. And so it planted this seed in my head. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm just gonna like let this we'll see what happens. So I went to college and I kept writing, but then I went to medical school and like that was the end of writing because it was too much information that I had to absorb. And then I went to residency and I was working 100-hour weeks and I couldn't do any writing then. And then I had little kids, which was also an obstacle to me writing. But then they got older and I was kind of practicing. I'd been practicing medicine for a while. And I thought to myself, how do I get back to being creative? And I was like, maybe I should write something. And so I started just taking classes online and then I met other writers and that was it. Like I met other writers and when there's somebody out there who's like waiting for your next chapter, you have to keep going. And so I kept going. and once you keep going, then the ideas keep bombarding you and then you can't stop.
Did you just Google like writing classes online? Like what is that process?
Yeah,
yes.
I Googled writing classes online initially. My first classes I took with writers.com. I wasn't sure what kind of writing I wanted to do. A lot of doctors write essays and nonfiction and that kind of stuff, but I knew I wanted to do something in the fiction vein. And pretty soon it became clear to me that I wanted to write for children because those were the books that stuck with me the most, the books that I read when I was middle grade age. And I was like, oh my goodness, like if I remember this now and that's what I want to write. That's like where my heart lies. And I think that middle grade is kind of where my voice naturally falls. Like I think I'm kind of mentally 12 years old.
Says the doctor, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And then, but like I said, and then I took in-person classes at Grub Street in Boston. And that's where I met a bunch of other writers. And then I joined SCBWI, and that was it. That was the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, maybe.
So how long from when you Googled how to take a writing class until you sold your first book?
So I took my first online writing class in 2011, and I sold my first book in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, I got my agent at the end of 2017, and then we sold 5 books that year in 2018. So then it just became this thing. And this book was the book that I had in my heart and in my head when I was working on another book. And I wasn't kind of allowed to work on this book because I had to finish another book. And so it was like my Friday night date.
Aww.
On Friday nights, I'd be like, I am allowed to think about this book. I didn't even write that much. I would just be like, okay, I'm just going to think about it and like think about things that I might do. And read other verse novels and, kind of study up like that. It was pretty cool. And then, so when I wrote the book, it was like pouring out of me. It was like, I couldn't write fast enough.
Do you feel that like going to med school and going through residency and putting in all of that time that I guess delayed gratification and satisfaction helped you in this process? Because that's a long time to go from writers.com to published book.
That's such an interesting, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. You know, maybe. So, but here's the thing. When you go to medical school and residency, you know the date on which you get your degree. Like, you know the date on which you're allowed to have a full license in medicine and practice. With writing, it is much more of a leap of faith. And I don't think I was really, I wasn't necessarily writing for publication when I was, when I first started writing, I was like, I just want to write and see what happens. And it was about like two years in, I would say, that I was like, okay, I think I want to be published. And then the next year I drafted my first novel. And, I didn't know how to write a novel. So it just took me forever. It took me 3 years to get it into the shape that I thought it should be in order to get an agent and hopefully sell it. And but it was time well spent. And in the meantime, I was writing a bunch of picture books and stuff like that too. And this book was it was drafted much more quickly than that. Thank goodness.
So I love novels in verse, but I don't really understand what makes them great. Like, I loved your book and I could tell that it was really great, but what do you think makes a novel in verse great? Because I feel like I understand other books, but I don't get it. I love them and I know when I love them, but I don't understand why. Like, to you, what makes a novel in verse great?
Okay, so I think novels in verse combine the best elements of poetry and novels. So I love poetry. I love language. I love the idea of being able to tell somebody a lot or convey a lot of emotion, especially with very few words. But if it's a novel, something also has to happen. There has to be some kind of plot. And so I think that for a highly emotional, very interior story, novel in verse might be the perfect way to tell it. Red, White, and Whole deals with some difficult issues, and basically somebody has had the whole time, right? And I feel like poetry gives you enough space on the page to breathe, even with emotional issues, and to be able to deal with them, because you don't spend that much time reading the words. So you can spend more time thinking about what they mean. And to me, novels in verse talk about, or they tell a story about a highly emotional topic or a highly emotional event in a way that is palatable to me. But honestly, what I love most about them are the musicality of the words, the beauty of the language, and the spare way in which they suck you in. I think that they're just amazing. And the novels that I read in preparation for writing this book all made me feel that way. Other Words for Home, Inside Out and Back Again, The Poet X, Blood, Water, Paint, All of Me, Emmy in the Key of Code. There are just so many amazing novels in verse for young readers. And I just tried to pay attention how they made me feel, and just tried to channel that.
Was the plan always for this to be a novel in verse?
It was. When the idea first came to me, I was like, I think this needs to be in verse. And then the next thought I had was, but I don't know if I can do it. Yeah. I don't know how to do that. And I've never written anything in verse before. I write picture books that are, that can be lyrical, and some of them are in rhyme. But I was like, an entire story, like a novel, I don't know if I can do that, but I just tried.
I think it worked out pretty well for you. So, and I found this year, I don't know what it is about this year, I am loving reading novels in verse aloud to my fifth graders. So we began the year with Jacqueline Woodson's Before the Ever After, and we're currently reading Megan Freeman's Alone.
I haven't read that one.
it's just, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm also wearing a mask, so it's like selfishly less words to read with into my mask. But I don't know. It's just, I think what you said about just giving it space and giving them more time to just absorb it and be there and present in the words. I think that makes a lot of sense. One last question: what is your hope for Red, White, and Whole?
Oh, well, I will tell you that as somebody who loved books like from a very young age, but who never really saw my own experience reflected in a book until I was an adult, but still empathized with every character I ever read about. I hope that readers see themselves in this story, that they can help, that it helps them understand what somebody else who's going through something difficult might be going through. Um, and to understand that we decide where we belong, that even when you feel torn apart or that you don't know if you're good enough, or if you fit with a certain group of people, that to seek out the ones who care about you and support you, and that your story matters no matter who you are. I don't think at 13, I mean, if I were a 13, if me at 13 thinking about writing a story like this, I would have lost my mind. I would have just been like, there's no way I can do this. But I think it's important because we all struggle with these same things. I think it is kind of universal in adolescence to be torn between wanting to be like everyone else and wanting to be unique. And so I hope that readers understand that, and that that the people who love us understand us more than we think they do.
Could we end this conversation with you reading the first page?
Absolutely.
I love this page so hard, so much. So thank you. While she gets ready to read this, I want to thank everyone for listening and watching this evening, or whenever it is that you watch the playback of this or listen to it on the Yarn podcast. Check this book out, Red, White, and Whole. If you haven't already, I promise you won't regret it. It is truly a special book, and I will get out of the way and let you enjoy these beautiful words.
Thank you. 2. I have 2 lives, one that is Indian, one that is not. I have 2 best friends, one who is Indian, one who is not. At school, I swim in a river of white skin and blonde hair and brown hair and blue eyes and green eyes and hazel, school subjects and giggles about boys, salad and sandwiches. And on weekends, I float in a sea of brown skin and black hair and dark eyes, MTV music videos, and giggles about boys, samosas and sabjis. In both places, I have gossip and laughter, music and silence, friendship. But only in one place do I have my parents.